Hi there, listener, and welcome to episode 222 of the Ski Podcast. This episode is the second in a set of podcasts I'm publishing this winter, focusing on women in the snow sports industry. First up, in episode 220, was BBC Ski Sunday presenter Shemi Alcott, and today I'm delighted to share my conversation with the CEO of GB Snowsport, Vicky Gosling, OBE. I thoroughly enjoyed chatting with Vicky. Rather like Shemi, Vicky is a powerhouse with a huge amount of energy and drive. And in this interview, we go behind the scenes of British skiing and snowboarding to find out what goes into running an organisation like GB Snowsport and how a country with no mountains regularly outperforms the traditional alpine nations on the racing circuit. We also find out about Vicky's background in the RAF, what it was like working alongside Prince Harry on the Invictus Games, and explore the link between snowsports and surfing. Now, before we start, I'd like to thank Intersport Ski Hire for sponsoring the show again this winter and making all of these episodes possible. If you are heading to the snow, listener, don't forget you can save money when you book your ski hire at intersportrent.com and use the code SKIPODCAST. You'll get a guaranteed discount for ski hire in France, Austria and Switzerland. And to make it even easier, you don't even need to use that code. Just take the link in the show notes and your basket will automatically be reduced. Right, let's listen to my interview with GB Snowsport CEO Vicky Gosling, OBE. I'm delighted to be joined today by Vicky Gosling, OBE. Now, if you're listening to this podcast, you'll almost certainly have heard of British skiers and snowboarders such as Dave Riding, Mia Brooks or Charlotte Banks. But what you might not be aware of is that all three have won World Cups or World Championships since Vicky took over the reins as CEO of GB Snowsport in 2018. And in fact, last winter was the most successful ever for British skiers and snowboarders with 50 World Cup, World Championship and X Games podiums, which all bodes very well for the next Winter Olympics in Italy. So while we love to celebrate the athletes in the limelight, I thought it would be really interesting to go behind the scenes and to find out from Vicky what goes into running an organisation like GB Snowsport and how a country with pretty much no mountains, apologies to Scotland, can outperform countries like Italy and the USA. And we'll also find out a little bit about Vicky's background in the RAF, what it was like working with Prince Harry and the link between snow sports and surfing. So apologies, Vicky, for that lengthy introduction. As listeners will soon discover, you pack a lot into your life. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you.
Well, we're going to discover how busy you are, but thank you very much for finding the time to fit in. What I always like to start off with asking my guests is when you last skied or snowboarded. When would that be for you, Vicky?
It was last Christmas. Well, it was a couple of weeks before Christmas, actually. We went out around the 10th of December. So it's been a while and we didn't manage to get out there at all prior to that. I was hoping to, but time, weather, and actually we've had such a packed programme that I haven't quite managed it.
And where were you in December?
In Teen.
Right, okay. And good conditions there, I guess early in the season and quite high?
Yeah, it wasn't too bad, actually. It was fairly icy, but it was good. It was good. We still managed to get some in.
Excellent. And I think I read somewhere else that Verbier is one of your favourite resorts, so you haven't managed to sneak in a trip to there?
No, I have to confess, Verbier has to be my favourite, but it is definitely my favourite resort. And we haven't managed it, but we are 100% planning on getting out there this Christmas if we can. Well, then that's what the plan is. So long as that, we're putting off booking actually, just because with climate and just trying to work everything out. We may be leaving it to the last minute, but we've committed that that's what we'll be doing.
Okay, excellent. Well, I referred a little bit early on to last winter, which was extremely successful. I wondered if we could take a closer look at that. I think I'm correct in saying there were 50 World Cup, World Champs and X Games podiums. And there was also a podium in every single discipline under the GB Snowsport banner. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. So that was, to be fair, so that was last season. And then this season, we've topped that again. We didn't have a World Championship this year, but we've topped the results again. We've actually improved on the World Cups that we've had this year. And of course, this year, we've seen our men's slalom team being 6th in the world, ahead of, as you say, America, Italy, and Canada, which is just phenomenal, bearing in mind we saw what happened post-Beijing. We lost all of the funding for Alpine. For the fact that, they've managed to come so far and be 6th in the world, we're just absolutely delighted with them. They're an incredible team.
Yeah, well, huge congratulations on that. I guess maybe not an easy question to answer, but why do you think the team was so successful?
I think we've got the most gritty team you have seen in terms of resilience. This team is made up of Brits with grit, as I love to say, and across the different disciplines, whilst every single discipline is different in the way that they operate, the way that they are culturally. I mean, you can't get more culturally sort of different than a cross-country skier and a snowboarder. However, they all operate under one umbrella, which is the GB Snowsport umbrella, and they feel like they're part of the family. And it's very much about one team. And together, we're stronger. Really, we really are. We've got a great mentality. And it's like Klopp says that it's 30% team tactics and 70% team. I think it's 20% tactics and it's 80% team.
For listeners to the podcast who might not know their football so much, I think I remember as well that, Vicky, you're a Liverpool fan, so you're referring to Jurgen Klopp there. We'll brush past that. But you've mentioned several things during there that we're definitely going to touch on in this conversation in relation to one team. You mentioned earlier, coming back from Beijing and some of the disappointments there. I wondered if I could just touch on your relationship with the head coach, Pat Sharples, someone who, I've known well for many years and I've interviewed on the podcast before. Would you like to expand a little bit on what his role is in the team and how he helps, that one team environment that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think Pat's probably the yin to my yang in that sense. He's brilliant. Pat is a guru of, I would say he's a guru of freestyle initially. Now he's a guru of everything, including para snowsport. And, there's not a lot that man can't turn his hand to, but he's extremely good when it comes to understanding the technicalities of the sport and what's needed, what tricks are needed. How do we keep ahead of the game? How do we keep ahead of our competitors? What tricks do they have in the bag? What are our athletes capable of? And he's also brilliant at identifying talent early and saying, right, he's grabbed me and said, right, we're heading over to France. We're going to meet with this youngster at the time, was a guy called Matteo, who was half British, half French. And we met Matteo when he was 14. He's now on our team and has just medalled as the world junior champion in moguls. So, we managed to keep him, take him from the French and kept him. And that just shows Pat's eye for detail in terms of, the talent coming through.
It's really interesting. And that talent spotting is definitely something we're going to refer to a little bit later on. And actually, I happen to know that, Pat, when he first came onto the scene, was a mogul skier before he, moved into freestyle. So he's probably even better at spotting that type of talent as well. I mean, some people listening to the podcast might think that if you're running GB Snowsport, it's all smart hotels and glitzy ski resorts, but it's kind of easy to forget that the logistics can affect us all. While I was doing my research for this interview, I understand that you and Pat were out in St Moritz, known as one of the most classy ski resorts in the world, but still had to sleep in your car one evening.
That is very true. So we'd actually been booked into some accommodation near where the competition was going to be panning out for border cross, and we booked the accommodation, but Pat's flight was late from Manchester. I'm laughing because he actually just been stuck in Manchester for the past 24 hours in the airport, bless him. So his plane was late, and by the time he got to the airport, it was around 10 o'clock. So we drove up the mountain. We got to the accommodation we were staying in, and because it was slightly cheap and cheerful, there wasn't anybody on there to let us in. So we sort of looked at each other. God knows it was on midnight, around 1 o'clock, and we said, okay, fine, let's just find somewhere. There's going to be somewhere else that we can get into. And we didn't want to wake the coaches and we didn't want to wake the team. So we drove further down the mountain and we found this hotel that was the only place actually that seemed open. So I had to go in and do the recce to find out actually that it was I think it was €1,114 per night. So I went in discreetly with my sort of my rucksack, my toothbrush, went in and said, oh, can I use the bathroom? Used the bathroom, asked how much it was, brushed my teeth, came back out and said, Pat, you need to go and do your teeth because we're sleeping in the car tonight. There's no way we can justify paying that. And that was for a twin room, so God help us. So we actually, it was pain. It was brutal actually, but because the hire car we had was tiny, and we had all Pat skis and all the kit and equipment, so we couldn't even roll the seats back. We should have gone for a big 4x4, but we didn't, again, because we were trying to save some money.
That possibly says something about the budgets, although I'm not sure how many teams would be spending €1,000 on a night in a hotel. And, maybe some people would find that type of challenge difficult, but, you definitely take everything in your stride, as listeners are probably working out. I wondered if we could take a step back and look at your career before you came to GB Snowsport, because I think that informs the attitude or the skills that you've taken into your job. Because back in the early 2000s, you were working in the RAF, I think. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, I did. I was a group captain at the helicopter base not far from me, actually, RAF Benson.
And I understand, while you were in the RAF, you enjoyed some ski competitions. You're actually competing for them and managed to, or you defeated the army during your reign there. One of the key highlights of that.
To be fair, my remit actually when I was in the RAF was the ski squad manager. So I actually went, I managed the team, which was fun. It was great fun. I used to ski, but to be honest with you, my talent is not in speed compared to the talent we had coming through. So when you can't, you manage, isn't that right? So that's what I did, and I managed the ski squad, had a brilliant time, and actually just had a love of the sport, as I did with a lot of different sports as well, but a real passion for the snow.
Right. Okay. So you were organising skiers, well in advance of joining GB Snowsport. But that competition side of things, or the organisation, wasn't just limited to ski, because I think I'm right in saying that you set up some adaptive groups in the combined services.
Yeah, so I ended up setting up what was called the Combined Services Adaptive Sports, which was an entity to cater for the men and women who'd been blown up in conflict, and just to get them back into sport. And it was while I was sort of doing that, when I was doing my base support commander role at Benson, that I was asked if I would then help Prince Harry set up what became the Invictus Games. He'd effectively gone out to the US. We'd sent him out there to have a look at something called the Wounded Warrior Games, and we sent 30 Brits out there actually as guests of the US. And the Wounded Warrior Games was something that the US had set up, which was catering for the men and women who'd been injured in conflict, the US men and women who'd been soldiers who'd been wounded in conflict, to get them back into sport using sport as a recovery tool. And Harry liked it so much that at the end of the press conference over there, and that was in 2013, he ad-libbed and said he was going to bring it back to the UK, make it bigger, make it better, and international. And so with that, my deployment to Afghanistan changed pretty quickly to actually helping set up what then became the Invictus Games. And then I went on to become the chief exec to take it to America, which was great fun. And I've kind of been involved more in a board strategic capacity ever since.
That must have been pretty amazing. So those first Invictus Games were held in London in 2014. What was it like working with Prince Harry then?
Do you know, it's great. I mean, when he started the games, he was serving. So he was a military soldier. He was very, very much, he was captain at the time. He was extremely passionate, loved his military life, and he was great to work with because he was a ball of fun and incredibly enthusiastic. And if it hadn't been for his passion and enthusiasm to get this done, then the games wouldn't be where they are now. That's what I would say.
Sure. And you moved on from those first games then, where you were, I think, the military executive lead, to actually being CEO on the second ones in 2016. They were in Orlando. That's
correct. Yeah. So I effectively took the brand over to Orlando to then put it on the global stage and grow it over there. Yeah, I mean, it was a fantastic journey. We increased it actually. We then brought in Jordan as an additional nation. So we increased the nations to 14. We increased the number of competitors we had to 500, and the sports from 9 to 10. So we brought in wheelchair tennis. I mean, it was an incredible experience. And then it went from Orlando to Canada. And it was at that point, I stepped back and said, right, okay. So I became the strategic advisor on the board for the Ministry of Defence, which has been great fun.
I mean, it must have been pretty challenging. I know that we obviously mentioned that you spent time with Prince Harry, but it must have been pretty inspiring, I guess, sharing the stage, because I think I read at the opening ceremony of those Orlando games, you had Morgan Freeman, Michelle Obama, George Bush Jr. standing up there with you as well, right?
Oh, yeah, it was in the box, actually. It was I had to get everybody ready for what they call the money shot, so get everybody ready in the box. And we did have all of those characters and more. and trying to get them all in place for the 8 o'clock ESPN sort of, opening that was going global on television, trying to get them all together and seated at the right times, like herding cats. And it was like a pinch yourself moment. I mean, talk about imposter syndrome. I probably had it in spades.
So you're pushing them around, getting them into the right space for the photo. But either way, incredible experience doing that. And that led on to your role with GB Snowsport. How did that role actually come about? Were you headhunted for it? Did you see it available somewhere?
No, I was headhunted for it. So I got involved in, I was involved in a few things. So rugby centurions and sport was kind of my thing. So I'd already been like the LTA counsellor for the LTA when I was in the armed forces. So I knew a few characters in sport anyway, and I was quite connected in rugby. And then I was literally just headhunted into what was called at the time British ski and snowboarding. And there was only a few sort of Olympic disciplines. We didn't have the para sports then, and we didn't have. We were just verging on getting mogul sorted and border cross and ski cross into the programme. So. It was quite a small little entity, and then I said to the chair and the board at the time, if I come in, do I get free rein to kind of be visionary and grow it and make it bigger and actually sort of scale it up so that we can effectively become a competitive nation on the world class stage. And I got the green light, so we rebranded to GB Snowsport. We got everybody under the same umbrella, took away all the different silos and some of the factions, and we merged with the Para Snowsports, and off we went on our journey. Yeah, it's been an incredible journey so far, as you said right at the beginning, and I couldn't be prouder of where we are now.
Sure, and you referred, earlier to that one team mindset. So that's literally what you're talking about there, bringing all those different factions, as you might call it, the different elements of what was British ski and snowboarding together with that one team mindset.
Yeah, 100%. I say, what you have to do when you've got a team like that, your job as a leader is effectively is empower them. So make sure that they feel like they've got mission command. Because if you think about all the different disciplines, we've got mini programs operating all over the place. So we've got, the moguls at the moment. So the head coach for moguls, Jeff, he's got the team, he's got the squad out there in Hintertux. Then you've got the Alpine team training, they'll be out in Austria. Then you've got the, the border cross team training somewhere else, and the ski cross team skiing somewhere else. And I've got the cross-country team out in Norway, and then the para-alpine team are up in Teen at the moment. So, and then you've got the men's and the women's programs. And so everybody's everywhere. And unless you empower them to feel like they have leadership of their small entities, all of the head coaches are empowered, that you'd struggle. So you have to have trust. And then we enable them by giving the right kit, the equipment, the resource, so they can do their job. And then just, I feel that my role is very much removing distractions. So white noise, taking away all the distractions that could possibly come in and, distract them from doing what they need to do to perform at the best of their ability. So if they're stressed, if they're concerned, are there money issues, what is it that they have going on that we can help with? And I think, of course, if anybody is wearing anything, a happy athlete is a performing athlete. So if they're wearing, concerns, grief, stress, they don't perform very well. So we try and do whatever we can by, be forward thinking, agile, and as I said, back in the military, adapt and overcome, really. And it's working, touch wood. Look, it's not perfect. There's lots of room to grow, but we're doing all right.
That is really interesting. So when you came in, you looked at changing the culture, literally the branding, the organization, etc. And one of the early stated goals, I think, was to become a top 5 snowsport nation by 2030. Is that still the case? And can I also check, what does that mean, a top 5 snowsport nation?
Yeah, so top 5 snowsport nation means getting X amount of podiums in every discipline, effectively. So when we go to the Olympics, we'd have to be making sure that we're doing okay across the different disciplines. You couldn't just do it in one; you'd have to do it across others. Now, the reality is, we got to Beijing and had a bit of a disaster because we didn't foresee COVID or Brexit, and that was clearly really challenging, particularly when you had other nations like New Zealand were able to use, they had the resort in the back garden effectively, whereas we were completely restricted. I mean, you could probably, the athletes did build some rails, etc., in their back gardens, But it just wasn't good for preparation. And then, of course, Brexit was restricting us on how many days we could spend in Europe as well. And again, that was like a military exercise, trying to work out who was where and when were they going to run out of days. I mean, really challenging, to be quite frank. So all of that complexity, we get to Beijing and, we bombed it, to be honest, in the Olympics. We did all right in the Paralympics. But on the back of that, we lost £3 million of funding and it was painful. So we reset the vision. We sort of looked at this really punchy vision and we're like, oh, are we going to get there? And actually, I still believe that we will, and I'll come back to that. But what we did do was say, look, let's focus on, for the next Olympics, let's focus on something that we know we can achieve. And that's putting more athletes on more podiums across more snowsport disciplines than ever in British history. And we keep doing that. So now it's actually looking at the fact we've got this men's alpine slalom team, 6th in the world. We're not that. And we've got the number 1 snowboarder in the world, and we've got the X Games champion, and we've got the border cross team champions, world champions. Actually, is it still a realistic goal to be looking at that top 5 in the world? It's not far off, I would say. And actually, I'm super excited about the forthcoming Olympics. I don't think we've ever been in a position like this.
You covered so many different points there, and I definitely would like to explore them a little bit more. Just to put this into context for the listener. So the kind of journey that we saw was in Sochi 2014, Jenny Jones became the first British person to win a medal on snow when she picked up a bronze in the big air there. Then there were 2 medals at Pyeongchang in 2018. Billy Morgan snowboarding again in the big air, and Izzy Atkin, I think it was, in the ski slope style. So there were such high hopes going into Beijing 2022. And as you observe, like, it was a very, very difficult Olympics. I mean, I've spoken to some of the athletes who went there, the presenters who went there. The restrictions, it being post-pandemic, were so restrictive and severe. It was very difficult to feel comfortable as an athlete while you were there compared to your normal circumstances. And, apart from what you were referring to there, the actual limitations in being able to train in the build up to Beijing 2022. Do you think the strict COVID regulations on location were a factor as well?
Oh, Iain, if you think about it, our sports, a lot of our sports are very freestyle in nature. And it was oppressive. I mean, oppressive. It was brutal and it was oppressive in terms of the restrictions were so tight. And from the clothing to the face mask, so you can't see anybody's face. It was minus 26 degrees. So the conditions were, you have a face mask on, you get a running nose, and then your face is freezing. And the fact you can't speak to people. So the language barrier, I think the whole combination, you arrive in the country and everybody is in a hazmat suit. It's just like, for me, I compared and contrasted it recently, the Iraq war. It actually being in a nuclear biological chemical suit, and here you are, everyone's in a hazmat suit. You've got a respirator, you've got a mask, you've got goggles on, and you can't see people, and but the enemy on this occasion is COVID, right? So it was very oppressive and very restrictive for these athletes, and I think how you can expect them to produce their best goods in that environment is, well, it's just kind of not happening, to be honest.
I interviewed Kirsty Muir, I think it was, last year, who was saying how stressful it was having to have a COVID test every single day, not just in the lead up to arriving and being paranoid that you were going to test positive and not be able to go and have to drop out at the last minute. But as soon as you arrived, every single day while you were there prior to competition as well.
But I tell you what else was really scary for them. You think about youngsters like Kirsty Muir and Zoe Atkin, only just turning 18, is not only did you do the test every day, but if you tested positive, they whisked you off to a facility that was nowhere near where we were based. So, it's really scary for them. And you watch these little ambulances turn up and take people away. Every morning you'd go and test, and every morning you had a fear factor. Actually, you were going to be the next person in that little ambulance being carted off and taken away to goodness knows where. And you couldn't take anybody with you. It was really intimidating for all of them. So they had that at the back of their mind as well.
So evidently, not the optimal circumstances for performance. But unfortunately, as far as I can see, I mean, you already referred to a reduction in funding. UK sport didn't take that into account per se. And, they like medals. After Pyeongchang, where there were more medals, the funding went up for that Beijing cycle, but it's come down again for that Milan Cortina cycle, and that's the way the UK sport funding works in 4-year cycles, right?
Yes, that's exactly how they work in the 4-year cycle. So, we're in a really interesting place now in that actually when you look at who we have in the mix for going to Italy, you've got Charlotte Banks, who's currently world champion for the team medal with Hugh. You've also got, Zoe Atkin, who's, she's won the X Games in the halfpipe. She's phenomenal. You've got Kirsty Muir, you've just mentioned, who's just coming back from injury. I mean, there isn't much better than her in terms of slopestyle and big air on, freestyle ski. She's phenomenal. And then you look at our mogul skiers, you've got Michaela Gherkin-Schofield, you've got Matteo, who, Will Fennelly, they're all coming through. And we haven't even talked about, Dave Riding, and of course Mia Brooks, number 1 in the world in snowboarding. Dave Riding, you've got Billy Major, you've got Laurie Taylor, all 3 of them breaking into the top 30. Dave started 7th. He's starting 7th in the season this year, so everyone's going to be watching out for him. And honestly, the talent is amazing, and that's just on the Olympic side. You look at the Paralympic side, you've got Menna Fitzpatrick and Katie Guest just blitzing everything, and Neil and Andrew Simpson, the brothers, in para-alpine, and of course looking at para-snowboarding, again, we're doing brilliantly with people like Ollie Hill, who won a medal at the Paralympics on snowboarding, first ever for Britain last year. So we're in a really good place and we're quite excited.
Yeah, well, there's certainly lots of very talented athletes who are doing well. The last couple of years' results have shown that. Is it frustrating that the funding is so directly related to results in like one single competition?
I'm pretty sure that you can imagine my reaction on the back of this amazing build-up, right, to Beijing, whereby let's put it out there. We had Charlotte Banks, who was the world champion the year before we went to the Olympics, right? So we had Charlotte Banks 4 seconds faster than anyone else. Dave Riding had just won Kitzbühel, first time in British history for him to get a podium, the first place podium at Kitzbühel. So we're taking Dave with us. We had Muzzy. I haven't even touched cross country actually as well. So we've got Andrew Musgrave and Jimmy in the team. But yeah, we had Muzzy, who was doing really, really well. We were taking him with us. We had Zoe Atkin, maybe young, but super, super talented, and Kirsty Muir. So we had all this talent coming with us, and we were on a really positive trajectory. And then, boom, we didn't deliver the results, and we lost £3 million. So having gone on an upward trajectory for the first couple of years, I'd sort of been around, and then it all gets taken away overnight. It's really challenging to then pick yourself back up after that, and to pick the team back up after that. And of course, we had to lose probably 50% of the team in terms of the central staff. So yeah, it's tough, but as always, we put on our iron braces and off we go again. And I would say, if anything, we've been more focused and actually more steely in our determination to just make it work. We're coming out the other side. And when we did the season with the World Championship year, no one believed it, right? Everyone was like 50 odd medals and 12 World Championship medals. How are you doing it? And a medal in every single one of the 12 disciplines. You're never going to keep that going. And then this season, boom, we overtook it. So we just need to keep focused. We need to keep driving forward, and we need to make sure we know what it takes to win. We know what it takes to win now. We've proven we know what it takes to win, but we can't afford to sort of be complacent or take our eye off the ball. Funding or no funding, where there's a will, there's a way, Iain, is what I say.
Well, I think I read in an interview with you elsewhere that you said there's nothing better than serious failure to teach you good lessons in life. And, coming back off Beijing, evidently the team has adapted well. So there is restricted or reduced finance funding now for the teams. Are certain amounts of that ring fenced strictly for, let's say, freestyle or alpine? How does it work?
So the funds that we do receive are restricted for freestyle, with the exception of a small amount that we get was 82,000. It's in the public domain now for day riding. It's ring fence for day riding per year. For alpine, we get a small amount ring fence for cross country. It's called national squad funding, and a small amount for para-Nordic actually. And again, we're doing really well with our it's a very small para-Nordic program, but we've managed to move that thanks to getting a silver medal. We've managed to move that from a national squad funding into world class funding, which has increased it slightly. We're doing okay. but it is ring fence, so it's quite particular and quite, strict on how and where we spend our money.
And you mentioned actually that 82,000 that's ring fence for Dave Riding, who's obviously had an incredible record, and I interviewed him earlier this year, and I think he actually shares that, does he not, with Billy and Laurie, because he's just that kind of guy, to be able to help them. But you referred earlier to some of those really unenviable decisions you have to make about how you allocate funds and the team itself. And I think I'm right in saying that, is it Dave's coach, Tris Glass-Davis, has moved on from GB Snowsport? He's gone over to the US because maybe, I don't know if this is right, but he was concerned about the security of his job, and that's why he's moved. Is that correct?
I think it's really fair to say, Iain, look, when you're faced with a funding cut like that and the money's ring fenced, it's really difficult to guarantee anybody any stability in terms of a career. And he's a fantastic coach. He's super smart. He's very, very good at what he does. And so he's moved to the US, and we think that's brilliant for him, although it's not great for us, based on the fact that they can provide him with that security. But that said, the team being the team, they've merged forces. Dave does share his pot because actually he feels like it's the dream team, and together they're stronger, and they really are. And they've proven that. They keep each other going. There's a brilliant dynamic culturally. That team's phenomenal. And of course, they've got Alan Baxter there now, who we love. We've got Jai Gaia, and we've just brought in TJ's just going to come in and support them as well from a waxing and physio point of view. So they've got a brilliant team. And now what we have to do is see what we can do to really get additional funding to back that team and support them all the way to Milan and beyond. Because there's some behind them. We've got the twins, we've got the Carrick Smith twins, and we've got other, look at Molly Butler, look at these other youngsters coming through. It's phenomenal, both on the freestyle, cross country, and on the alpine side.
There are so many points you're bringing up that I'm really interested to discuss. I mean, I was lucky enough to go out to Chamonix for the Kandahar slalom, and I got to meet all three of the athletes and talk to them then, as well as that separate interview with Dave. And there's that real sense of the team there. And you referred to it. They were sixth in the world. I think they were ahead of the USA, Italy, Canada, all nations that you would perceive to be stronger. Yet they're doing it, on a shoestring, and funding continues to be an issue. I mentioned you're a Liverpool fan. Hope this won't end the conversation, but I'm a Man United fan. And I know that Britain's fourth richest man, Jim Ratcliffe, famously likes investing large amounts of money into sport. I also know he's a skier, and he has properties in Courchevel, and he has donated 11 million euros, I think it is, to help fund a new clubhouse for the Club des Sports there in Courchevel. Surely, have you ever had any contact with him about funding for the UK team?
We have actually, but he was he's happy funding the French at the moment, is the way that I think his children have skied with the French. So the door's open. We'd be always willing to accept support, and we'd love to obviously work with him. But no, unfortunately, it could have been a timing issue.
It would be small change to him for sure, because I think I've read that, £350,000 a year is really what we're looking for the Alpine team. Let's move on to, something more positive. You mentioned that great talent that's coming through, and you've already referred to, Mia Brooks as youngest ever world champion. I was lucky enough to interview Zach Carrick Smith earlier this season, double youth Olympic champion. And he has two brothers, a twin and older brother, Luca and Freddie. Dave told me in his interview, I might have been the first to win a World Cup, but I guarantee I won't be the last. What are your thoughts on that new talent coming through?
Oh, they are, not only are they incredible, they are gorgeous characters as well. They are just, and they're both, all three of them are big surfers, so it kind of plays right into my sweet spot. So yeah, the big surfers as well as, skiing. Obviously everyone's like, don't steal them for surfing. They're so talented, and how proud are we to have them in the mix. What we just now need to do is ensure that actually we are putting the right foundations in place to enable them to thrive and get to where they truly have the potential, which is the best in the world. And they're the best in the world in their age group now. So let's then, enable them to get that bit further, as Dave said. They'll be chasing on his tails. But they've got to get past Billy and Laurie. Yeah, we still got Billy and Laurie in the mix, and they're doing really well. I'm excited about them. I had Jai and Alan on a call actually last Thursday, and they were talking to me about training times for Billy and Laurie and Dave. And their training times are right up there. So it's super exciting. Again, we just got to give them 82k ain't going to cut it. So we're grateful for all the additional support we get from people like Tenzing and others, and proud of a partnership we've now got with the Financial Times too. So we'll be pushing it hard.
Well, that's good to hear about the Financial Times. Certainly, one of the things that became evident to me when I was, doing my research before chatting to Dave and the other team members is that, he is, a veteran athlete, let's say. I think he's 37 now. He's certainly, we discussed about how he's the second oldest to get a podium in the World Cup. And if he can get another, then he'll become the oldest. But if you look at how Billy and Laurie are doing now relative to how Dave was at that age, they're actually outperforming him. And so, what you're referring to, okay, they're just breaking into the top 30 in the world, but it takes a while to build that experience at that level. And so to see, the younger guys performing at a very high level, and they'll be going into Europa Cup this year rather than World Cup, so they'll be able to develop that experience, get their fist points even more. It is, very exciting to see how they're going to progress. You mentioned they were all surfers. I missed that in the interview. I should have spotted that somehow. Yeah, on that subject of kind of crossover, you're also chair of GB Surfing. Does that mean you're like the go-to specialist for non-traditional British sports?
Good, actually, because the crossover is huge. So I would never call myself an expert in anything. I've got people like Pat Sharples and the team doing that bit. But what I would say is actually having oversight of both is really helpful, because the synergy is, and what I've learned through Snowsport that I can actually transfer to surfing, because surfing's only just building on its journey now with progression funding. So what I can transfer across there has been really helpful. And the athletes is really interesting, particularly in the freestyle snow sports. They cross over really well with surfing. They really enjoy it. And obviously now looking at the characteristics, they're alpine, but they love their surfing. So I think it's the thrill of it, really. I mean, these are adrenaline junkie type of sports, aren't they? Let's face facts. Have you prepared to throw yourself into some of the waves that I've now seen, or you're prepared to throw yourself down, those slopes at the speed they do? Yeah, every single bit of it comes with risk, and these guys handle it so well. So there's obviously a crossover. And the women we've got in the programs, and that where they're taking it to is another level entirely as well, which is exciting.
As you mentioned, surfing is definitely on, let's say, an upward trajectory in terms of awareness. I think there's plenty of surfers in the world, but it's going to feature in the Summer Olympics, Paris this year for the first time. Well, in Tahiti, to be specific. But there won't be a British team there. I read today that Sky Brown has, definitely secured selection for the skateboarding team. She was very close to qualifying for the Olympics, right, as well.
She was really close. I had the fortune of being out in Puerto Rico, actually, and she made it all the way through the repechage rounds, and she just got pipped. Had we got a handback spot, she was one of the first ones kind of up there. So both herself and Aaron went through the whole main round right until the end as well. So we've got some incredible talent. Sadly, we're not going to be performing, not competing in Tahiti. But when you look forward, actually, at the talent we've got, and people like Lucas Skinner, and you look at at LA and then followed by Brisbane, I think the future is extremely bright for surfing for Britain. Extremely bright.
Oh, well, talking about crossover there between, snow sports and surfing. What about coming back from, let's say, skateboarding? You talk about talent spotting. Pat's very good at, finding different talent. Do you target potential crossover from other sports, such as, I don't know, skateboarding, or maybe people with a great aerobic capacity like rowers or cyclists for cross country?
Yeah, so it's exactly that. So we do the talent ID days. Sky is great, between skateboarding and surfing. Actually, a lot of our athletes can surf and they can skateboard. We did a skateboarding day, actually, we did a whole course of it called Find Your Balance under the bridges in the skateboard park in Westminster. And we used some of our athletes like Katie Ormond to come and Billy Cockrell to come and actually teach the kids with the skills and, help them. And then transfer them into the snow dome. So we do that. And then, as you rightly say, cross country, there's a great crossover there with rowing. And we do it para sports as well. Scott Mean is our brilliant para-Nordic athlete. And we're just looking now at actually how do we bring talent from the other disciplines into para-Nordic.
Really interesting. It'd be really interesting to follow that. I mean, there's so much to cover here, and you keep bringing up things that give me other thoughts. But I wonder if we could just segue back to skiing. You mentioned before the B word, which I never like bringing up, but Brexit. It's had a lot of impact on the team. You mentioned about trying to organise in 90 days and 180 days with athletes and things like that. I wondered, because I've done lots of winter seasons, back in the day. I wonder if it's affected the opportunities for young Britons, to go and work in the Alps. I mean, that might change. There's discussion about a youth mobility scheme. But, I can think of two of our medal winners, Jenny Jones and Billy Morgan. They both developed their skills doing seasons out in the Alps. We can always produce fridge kids, but do you think that flow of talent is affected by fewer people doing seasons?
It's really hard to say, and I don't think we've got enough statistics to prove that yet. I think that will come. Well, it was a major concern for us to start with, to be fair. But in terms of that talent, I'm not sure. I think we're going to have to watch this space, aren't we? We'll start to see things that we didn't, the unintended consequence. We will probably realise later down the track. I wouldn't say that I've seen it right now, but it is a possibility.
Well, that's encouraging. I mean, I interviewed Stu Brass recently. He talked about when he first met Jenny Jones out in Teen, and she was just doing a season, and he could see straight away. I mean, this is quite a few years ago, but he could see straight away she was a super talent. Said, "Hey, look, come to the Brits." And it's just that type of thing I'm visualizing. I mean, maybe talent is spotted so much earlier now that wouldn't work like that. But let's be positive and hope that, is going to still pay off. What about another major uncertainty I have to bring up is climate change. We've seen races cancelled. And in fact, that race that I went to, the Kandahar in Chamonix, is sort of recognised as being the first global warming determined slalom. What happened was the skiers go down, the first 30 qualify for the next round, and they flip. So the 30th goes first. And that guy who went 30th won the race because as it got warmer and warmer, the course got slower and slower. And it's never happened before that someone who started 30th has managed to win the race. So the point I'm making is that, climate change is starting to affect races. FIS are under a lot of pressure to change their schedule to reduce emissions. Do you have any views on that at all?
I think it's really challenging, Iain, as you know, and we continually have to revise everything that we're doing so that we are being responsible in how we operate. But for sure, it is more challenging if we are sending, athletes into different locations. If you've got a World Cup one weekend and it's in Europe, and then, 2 weekends later it's in America, and then it's back into Europe. It's the scheduling, it's the timing, it's the proximity and the clusters we are really all crying out for now to say we need those clusters. We need clustering in location to try and prevent us bouncing from one country into another and just increasing the air miles that we're actually, in the carbon footprint that we're creating, because obviously we've got quite a way to go. We haven't got anything on our doorstep. So it's certainly challenging, and it's absolutely got to be a FIS-led to enable us. We all can play our part for sure, but we need FIS to do their job in ensuring actually the scheduling makes sense across all of the disciplines and across the para disciplines. I mean, we still don't even have the schedules out actually for the para snowsports for this year yet. We're just waiting. So it's a challenge.
That conversation is evidently going to continue. But I think FIS are certainly looking at making changes now. But overall, we are now, feels to me, incredibly close to Cortina Milan 2026. I mean, it's probably I'm going to say 18 months away or something like that, which in Olympic cycle terms is next to nothing. So it's going to be very exciting to follow all of the athletes, who are currently doing so well. And I am extremely optimistic and very hopeful that GB Snowsports Team GB, will get those medals and therefore continue that momentum for, more funding and enable things for the future. So thank you very much for your time today. I know you're extremely busy. We haven't even touched on the fact that as well as doing everything we've discussed, you've got, a family. I know you mentor students at Bath University. You mentioned the Rugby Football Union, etc. But I found our conversation really very interesting. I'm sure our listeners will as well. So I want to wish you and the team all the best on that journey. And listener, if you or your employer want to support GB Snowsport in that journey, you know who to contact, especially you, Mr. Ratcliffe, if you're listening. Thank you for your time, Vicky. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you. I've really enjoyed it, Iain. Thanks very much.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Well, I really enjoyed speaking with Vicky, and I hope you enjoyed it too. If you did, why not let me know? I enjoy all feedback about the show, so you can contact me on social at The Ski Podcast or by email theskipodcast@gmail.com. We have had some feedback since our last episode. Rob Smith on Instagram, he enjoyed the Chemi Alcott episode. That was 220. He says, it was really interesting to listen to the determination and drive from such a young age. I thought I was brave at 10 years old, setting off into the hills on my own on a mountain bike. Never mind going to New Zealand training. Victoria Bushnell says, my new Sunday listening is the Ski Podcast hosted by Iain Martin. So I hope you enjoy this one on Sunday, Victoria. Thank you. And come skiing with me on Instagram was referring to episode 218 when I suggested that Teen might be leaving competitors out because they're trying to free themselves up to join Vale Resorts. And they say, I concur on your theory. Well done on the scoop. Finally, MC Squared Woodwork on Instagram says, I truly love skiing and you bring together so much amazing content and extremely helpful information. After holidays and teens the last 2 winters, my 6-year-old is hooked too. They also say, we rented from Intersport, although they may not want us back as my little one snapped a ski last winter going over a jump. Now, if you do like the Ski Podcast, there are 3 things you can do to help. You can review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and that helps other people find us. You can subscribe. Every episode will automatically be downloaded for you, and you can catch up at your leisure. Or you can book your ski hire with Intersport Rent using the code SKIPODCAST, or simply take the link in the show notes. There are now 228 episodes of the Ski Podcast, and 138 of those were listened to in the last week. And that's because there is so much to listen to in our back catalogue. We have covered so many destinations and stories. So just go to theskipodcast.com, search around those tags and categories, and you're bound to find something of interest to you. The stats also tell me that 55% of our listeners in the last week were in the UK, 15% in the States, and the rest of you listening in countries as diverse as Malaysia, Colombia, and South Africa. You can follow me at Skipedia and the podcast at the Ski Podcast. I'd like to thank Vicky for joining me and sharing her time for this interview. And finally, listener, thank you for joining us wherever in the world you are. And until next time, goodbye.